This week on List Rate Rank.
I got canceled.
Well, hopefully your appearance here on List Rate Rank is not going to get you canceled again.
On List Rate Rank, our hosts research various topics and each bring their own top 5 list to the show. Together they debate, discuss, and deliberate, and with the help of an expert, one definitive and indisputable top 5 list is created.
And I was shocked. I was shocked.
This is List Rate Rank.
All right, welcome to List Rate Rank. I'm David Fedor.
And I'm Felicia Gillespie.
And today we are talking about the top 5 most shocking Beatles facts. Now, Felicia, are you a Beatles fan?
You know what? I know virtually nothing about the Beatles. I know that when I was in high school marching band, we performed Beatles songs as part of our competition. That's really about it. I know some songs, but I am not like a diehard Beatles fan. So all of these, any fact is shocking to me when it comes to
Well, yeah, they definitely have had like a ridiculous career. And back in the 60s, anything they did was shocking because it was just them doing stuff. So that was a time when everything under the sun was, oh, don't do that. So today we're going to get to the bottom of some of the most shocking of the shocking. And like, here's a qualifier. They're one of the most covered bands in existence. They're ridiculously popular, of course. And so if you're a diehard Beatles fan listening to this right now, these might not be shocking to you. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, I would agree. Probably, and I didn't think about what you just said back when the Beatles were Beatlemania was happening. These would have been way more shocking than they are today.
Yeah, especially when you consider their career arc. They started as suit-wearing, hair-combed, like nice little proper British boys. But we'll get to that. We'll get to some of those, I'm sure. In order to see who goes first, earlier today we had, Felicia, could you believe it? We had a beetle eating competition. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And yeah, that's BEETLES. And of course you won, you dominated. You had like 25 or something.
Total domination, David. I don't even know why you even challenged me to this.
Well, I stopped after 4 because I thought I got them all. I had John, Paul, George, and Ringo down. I was going for speed and I had all 4, and then I was like, that's it. And then you're just still chomping away and won.
Yeah, I thought maybe you were at 20. That's why I kept pushing, and I got 25.
Yeah, you could have stopped at 5. You should have looked over and saw my plate.
Now I have Pepto-Bismol, and I'm good.
All right, so you get to go first. What is your number 5 most shocking Beatles fact?
All right, my number 5 is that they all contracted gonorrhea in Hamburg early in their career. And to me, that's shocking. I mean, it shouldn't be shocking. They're a boy band. They're on the road. They're touring. But all of them, really, they all like bang the same chick, the same dirty chick with gonorrhea. But yeah, I mean, what are the odds of all 5 of them? Wait, there are 4? all 4 of them getting gonorrhea. That doesn't seem right.
And maybe even in that time, too. I'm not sure of the gonorrhea rates over the course of the past 4 decades, but that was probably more rare. That was more of an achievement then, I think.
Yeah, I agree. That's why.
Like, yeah. One Direction now, I'll have it. Like, and that's just assumed. Like, of course they all have it. But for the Beatles to get it, they had to like get it. They earned it.
Yes, the badge of honor. They probably celebrated it. They were like, "Wait, you have gonorrhea? Yeah, I have gonorrhea too. Oh my god!" And high fives all over the place. I really can't. There's really nothing more to say about that fact.
Right.
But my mind was a little bit blown. I was like, "Okay, all right, they got around. Nice."
Yeah. Excellent. Well, my number 5 is a little less fun. Not that gonorrhea is fun, let's be honest. But in 2001, Paul McCartney witnessed 9/11 from a plane.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So Paul McCartney was on a runway getting ready to take off in a plane at JFK Airport while they were like looking out the windows and seeing smoke coming out of World Trade Center, and then 2 plumes of smoke. So this is a quote from Paul McCartney. He says, quote, "Out of the window on the right-hand side of the airplane, you could see the Twin Towers. First there was a plume of smoke, and then there was a second. Finally, a steward came over to him and said, look, something serious has happened in New York and we've got to get you out of here. And they like ushered him off the plane. I'm assuming the rest of the people too. But Paul McCartney was on an airplane watching 9/11 unfold.
I mean, this had to be a private jet, right?
I would assume.
Yeah,
Yeah, Paul McCartney doesn't fly coach. What are you talking about?
Right. Man, that is a really. Now I'm like, well, what is this guy's 4 through 1? How does it get any more? That's crazy. That is really interesting.
So, but yeah, but he ended up being stranded in New York and ended up putting together this big concert for the first responders and everything like that. And the Who was there, Mick Jagger, Billy Joel, Elton John, all a bunch of these celebrities. He pulled together David Bowie, and they put on a concert called The Concert for New York City. And he raised like millions of dollars, and it became a thing. But yeah, when I found that, I was like, wow, that's on the list. That's a shock.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's going to be a hard one to top because that's pretty good one, and I did not see that one anywhere in all of the research that I did.
I was digging.
You were digging, and I was digging too. But man, that's a good one. That's congratulations. that was already going on the list. I feel like. So, okay, my number 4 is that, probably this isn't shocking to most people, but I thought this was interesting, and it was the one about George's dentist drugging them and giving them LSD without them knowing it. Now, I don't know. I read this in a couple different places, and they said, that it inspired the record called Revolver, right?
That is one of their records.
Yeah, and it inspired the song Help. I don't know how true all of those stories are. That alone is pretty cool. Like being drugged, especially back then, and LSD went before it got big and was available to the public, and by your dentist. So it's like, that's shocking. And they said, you probably know this story, but they said that they were terrified. They had dinner at George's dentist's house. And the dentist and his girlfriend insisted that they stay for coffee. They didn't want to. They were like, no, I think you should. And by the way, drink all of the coffee. And your first red flag, like, oh, okay. And then after that, they're like, hey, guess what? There's LSD in the sugar cubes. And John Lennon said something like, he swore at them and he was like, how could you do this to us? And they were both terrified. They said it was like being in a nightmare all of a sudden.
Yeah, so rightfully so.
Yeah, I mean, you can't possibly have a good trip if you're taking. I've never had LSD, but I can imagine you can't have a good trip if you don't know what's happening, and then all of a sudden someone's like, "Hey, guess what? You're in it for the next 8 hours." Oh my God, I'd be livid. And
all I gotta say is, after dinner, drinking a cup of coffee, that's rolling the dice enough as it is. I'll be up until like 2 o'clock in the morning saying, why'd I drink that coffee? Like, at least maybe with the LSD, I might be able to like get a nap in somewhere. I don't know.
That's a really good point, David. I mean, especially if you already want to leave the party and they're like, no, be more awake with us for longer. Yeah, you're right. Nah.
All right, so my number 4 is the real reasons they quit touring. So at the beginning of their career, the Beatles toured and did all the stadium shows, did all these live performances and things like that. And then around 1966, like halfway through their existence as a band, they just stopped performing and became studio musicians and just put out music. They quit touring because the girls, there were a combination of things. One of it was the girls screamed so loudly that they couldn't hear themselves play. So they would literally just be playing in the stuff so nobody could hear what they were doing. And it was like, this is awful. We have no idea what we're doing. The girls were they were going so insane during the concerts in the shows that they would just piss themselves. So they said that the whole stadiums just smelled like piss and it was awful. And then finally, one of the things was that one of them said that they liked jelly beans. And fans would bring jelly beans and throw them at them to be like, I love you. Here, eat some jelly beans. And they said it would hurt. and it would be awful. And they couldn't play because they were being pelted with these little hard jelly beans all the time. So that's my number 4. They had to quit touring because the girls who came to the show would pee so bad that it stunk. It was so loud that they couldn't hear themselves, and they kept getting physically assaulted by candy.
I mean, those are definitely, that's an odd combination of barriers to continue touring. They're all kind of, I mean, yeah, that urine one.
Yeah.
And I would definitely not tour if those things were going on, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, jelly beans don't taste good when everything smells like urine anyway. It's not like you enjoy that.
They barely taste good as it is. And you definitely can't play, you definitely can't sing I Want to Hold Your Hand while you got a mouthful of jelly beans. So what are they even doing?
And these, hardcore fans really, when they throw the jelly bean, they try to get it directly into the mouth right when it's open. Right when they're yes. Oh my God. No, you can't play under those conditions. They're like, I can't work like this. And then they stop.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So, all right, I'll move on to number 3. My number 3 is, I like this one. This is about John Lennon's father being absent throughout his life. And then when Beatlemania happened, his father suddenly just showed up. And John was like, okay, all right. And he wanted all of the journalists and everything to keep it private, publicists to keep it private. One day, his father's photo shows up in the newspaper. And his father's like, you know what? I'm going to cash in on this fame. And then he releases an album, his own album.
What?
And John was really embarrassed by this. And he told his manager, please do whatever you can to not make this album a hit.
Holy cow.
Yeah, people forgot about it. But if anyone has it today, it's worth $65. So, yeah.
So it didn't become a hit.
Nope, it did not. But wow. I think that's pretty interesting. Your dad's just gone the majority of your life, and then he shows up and he's like, "Hey, and you know what? I'm gonna use this opportunity to make whatever money I can."
That's pretty awesome. I would buy that album.
Yeah.
I have a few Beatles records, of course. As a white teenage boy in suburbia, I went through my Beatles phase. But I don't have any of their dad's albums. I would totally buy that album.
Yeah, they say he was a pretty good musician. He just was unreliable, hence the abandoning his family.
All right, so I'll go on to my number 3 then, which is all the hidden things in songs. So this is a couple things. Of course, you got the stuff like the Paul is dead kind of the things that people made up. But I like the things that are actually in the songs that are little Easter eggs. For example, in Hey Jude, around the 3-minute mark, you could hear somebody clearly exclaiming, "Oh, fucking hell." Mm-hmm. I didn't go and listen to it, but I'm assuming that it is true. Yeah. Did you go listen to it?
No, I didn't, but I did see this.
Yeah. So I love that, they left that in there. I love that the backing vocals of the song Girl, they say tit, tit, tit instead of dit, dit, dit or something like that. They snuck in a couple tits, which is fun. The very end of the song, A Day in a Life, if you let the record play, it's not on the CD, but it's on the LP. If you let the record play, there's a high-pitched, inaudible note that's pretty much just like a dog whistle, so that only dogs could hear and go crazy. So if you're sitting there listening to this record and all of a sudden your dog's like, it's because they hid an inaudible dog whistle note in the album, which I think is badass. And then the last one I like, the song Free as a Bird. When they came out in the 90s with the Beatles anthology, at the end of the song Free as a Bird, they put backwards vocals in there of John Lennon saying, "Turned out nice again," which was kind of like this nice little full circle thing. They're all playing together and stuff. So those things, I like the shockingness of the dog whistle and all the other swears and stuff in there. So that's my number 3.
Yeah, I agree. I heard the first two. I didn't know about the dog whistle, and I didn't know about the message. At least it's not demonic. That's what makes it. Well, my number two, which everyone probably knows, and this is the first fact that I found in my research, and I was completely shocked, and it was that all of the Beatles watched George Harrison lose his virginity. And I was like, wait a minute now, how did this? And I didn't realize, like, they're a touring band. They're sleeping together. They don't have any money yet. They're young. And so, yeah, and they cheered him on. But later, Paul McCartney said he didn't know if it was Harrison losing his virginity that night. But either way, it was scandalous that they all shared a room together. And that was the norm. Whenever somebody brought a girl back, everyone would just be quiet and kind of just lay there.
They're nice, respectful British boys. I will stay here silent, let you do your thing, and then we'll all high five.
Yeah, and that's my number two, because it's like, all right.
Well, my number two is also George related, so I'm just going to segue into that now. But it's specifically about George's first wife, Pattie Boyd. So George's first wife, Pattie Boyd, was the inspiration to the song Something, which is one of my favorite Beatles songs. She ended up falling in love with George's best friend, Eric Clapton. After she divorced George Harrison, she ended up marrying Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton wrote the songs Layla and The Way You Look Tonight about Pattie Boyd. So to me, one of the awesomest, most shocking things is that the songs Something, Layla, and The Way You Look Tonight are all written about the same woman. Three of the most romantic songs were all inspired by this muse, which to me is pretty damn cool. On a side note, also pretty damn cool, George Harrison, he was a sex fiend, basically. Had affairs with everybody, including Ringo's wife. One source says he has had hundreds and hundreds of affairs, and like his marriages were all like swinging and openness and all that stuff. And if you're a Beatle, that's the status you get. So that was kind of cool. But my number two is Pattie Boyd.
Wow. That ties in with my number one, which is that George Harrison had an affair with Ringo Starr's wife. And that's, to me, that when you say he's a sex fiend, it's like, yeah, that makes sense then. Because you're in this band, you're like brothers, your family. They were like super close. And to just have an affair with one of the dude's wives, it's like, oh man, you've got to be a sex addict, right?
Right. And from what I was reading about it too, is like he didn't even pretend to hide it or to try to be any kind of like, let's do this secret. He announced it at dinner, I'm gonna sleep with her, or something like that. It was like very, very blatant.
Yeah, at the dentist's dinner, probably. So Ringo and his wife stayed together through it until it was revealed that Ringo was having his own affair with a model, and that's when they, I guess, got divorced. So affairs all around, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've all had several wives, and all of those wives were very, very lenient in terms of the definition of the term faithful, which you're marrying a Beatle, like it's going to happen. I'm not approving it or damning it. It's just a fact. Like,
you got to be ready to be cheated on for sure.
Yeah, and Pattie Boyd went on record and she was like talking about it, and she was like, yeah, that's just kind of, we were all doing drugs. It was all free love type stuff. That's just what happened back then. It's like, all right.
Yeah, and that's why they think the dentist drugged them. I think somebody said they think that the dentist thought maybe we were going to have a gangbang. And
it's not surprising they all had gonorrhea then.
Yeah.
I mean, it all loops back. It all loops back.
Full circle.
All right, so my number one most shocking Beatles fact is everyday chemistry. Does that mean anything to you, everyday chemistry?
I have no clue what that is.
So in 2009, September 9th, 2009 to be exact, a person who posted anonymously online because he didn't want his identity to be known, so he went under the name of James Richard, traveled to another dimension. And in this alternate reality, the Beatles did not break up in 1970. And to prove it, James Richard brought back with him an album called Everyday Chemistry that version of the Beatles actually recorded. So it's available. You can download on his website. That website is, for those interested, thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com. It's an album made by John, Paul, George, and Ringo from an alternate reality, as if they never broke up. You don't seem shocked.
I'm soaking this in, and I want to know how much the cassette cost.
I mean, he put it out there for the public to consume because it's that important.
Free.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so a lot cheaper than John Lennon's father's album.
Right.
I am shocked. I'm speechless. That's why I'm just frozen with like, wow, this is definitely the most shocking fact. Now, have you heard this album at all?
I have listened to it.
And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you're not a believer in alternate realities, you might assume that this guy took solo works that the members of the Beatles did after the Beatles broke up and just meshed them together into like really crappy sounding songs. That might be something that you assume that happened. But I am shocked that it actually happened. That's why it's my number one.
Yeah, I'm going to go with it. It's real too, even though I haven't heard it at all. And I'm really glad that he put his story out there because a lot of people would be afraid to say something like this. But he knew this is more important.
This needs to be known.
For this to be out here, for the public to hear, it's more important than me being called a nut job. And I really have a lot of respect for that. I like that one. That's a good one. You got me on that one.
And we're going to get our expert later with it too, because it's the number one of mine. So she has to talk about alternate realities and everyday chemistry.
I can't wait.
I want to know what she thinks. So the way it works here on List Rate Rank is both of our number one facts are both automatically going to go to the next round for our expert to rate and rank. So everyday chemistry will be there, and the George and Ringo affairs will be there as well. None of our list was repeated, so now we have 3 spots remaining and 8 different items to choose from to fill those 3 spots.
Wow. Well, I'm going to fight for the John Lennon's father one because I just think that's pretty interesting. So I got to fight for that one to be in there.
You don't have to fight at all because I love it and it will be in there.
Nice.
And I'm very, very much fighting the temptation to go and hop on eBay right now and look it up and buy one. I will say that I'll throw out my Pattie Boyd selection because it closely relates to your number one, which is all to do with the affairs and things like that. Yes. So I'll throw that out. I think a shocking, interesting fact was that Paul McCartney was an eyewitness to 9/11.
I'm on board with you there. You came out of the gate, with shocking me, so it's going on for sure.
Awesome. So we have one more that we have to choose between: quitting touring, hidden stuff in songs, gonorrhea, LSD, and George's virginity. Like, so for the...
Let's throw out the gonorrhea one. That's not that shocking.
It's not that shocking, yeah. And we already have stuff in there about people having group sex, so we don't need to add that down. The George's virginity, that was in a lot of lists, so I would say that that's too well known.
I agree. Let's throw that one out.
And then, of course, quitting touring is well known. Hidden stuff in songs is well known, regardless of the specifics of it. I saw a lot of the dentist LSD on other lists, but I also think it's a pretty shocking thing that somebody not only got away with drugging half of the Beatles and their wives, but also sparked the interest in drugs to the point where it probably sidetracked their careers. Who knows the type of music they would have been making and
Yeah.
if they would have split up if they hadn't had that experience. So I would say LSD dentist is deserving.
Yeah, I agree with you, and not just because it was on my list. I was going to give you, give you credit for the quit touring one, because those are very odd reasons to quit touring. Because it's like you're at your height of maybe not your height, but it's a lot of fame going on there. You have to quit touring because people will not, because there's so many people doing too many crazy things. You just can't even get your music out there. That is pretty shocking, but maybe the LSD was just slightly more. So.
All right. Well, you win it. You get it. So after the break, we're going to be joined by our guest expert who's going to help us rank in order our top 5 between Paul witnessing 9/11, a dentist drugging the Beatles with LSD, John Lennon's dad releasing an album, Everyday Chemistry, and George and Ringo's affairs. This is List Rate Rank. Stick around.
Hey everybody, this is Jeff, the host of Stuff I Never Knew Trivia Game Show podcast. Each week, 3 players from around the world call in and battle it out over 3 rounds of trivia. Each week there's a new show. You'll meet new people from around the world. We have over 80 episodes. We're in season 4. That's the Stuff I Never Knew Trivia Game Show podcast, available everywhere you listen to podcasts. That's stuffineverknew.com, stuffineverknew.com, that's stuffineverknew.com.
Okay, welcome back. Sibbie O'Sullivan is a retired senior lecturer in the Honors College at the University of Maryland. She's a book reviewer for the Washington Post, specializing in music, culture, and the arts. Her book, My Private Lennon, Explorations from a Fan Who Never Screamed, is a series of linked autobiographical essays that explore the musical, cultural, and personal aspects of intense music fandom and offers a new point of view from which to consider the Beatles' impact on society and on the individual. And today, she's our guest expert in the top shocking Beatles facts. Sibbie, welcome to List Rate Rank.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for making time to talk with us. I want to say right off the bat, I read your book. I love your insight as a lifelong Beatles fan. It's a fascinating journey.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about, now, Felicia and I just talked about for quite a bit, these shocking Beatles facts. Beatles, of course, are one of history's biggest bands. Can you tell us now, looking back, experiencing all of these things in real time compared to us who learned about it historically?
Well, it happened quite surprisingly. Being there was very important to me when I started to consider how I would write about my love of John Lennon, especially, but also just the Beatles and what they meant to me. So I was inserted in a piece of history that I didn't anticipate, and that came to be kind of the major development of my life. That just kept expanding outward because the Beatles allowed so much more music to be heard, so much more allowance for what was considered popular music. They were so different. Even in their cover songs, you could hear that difference, which I attribute to them being English, that even though they loved Black American music, they were not soul singers, they were not blues like Rolling Stones or the Animals. There was something different. And of course, their voices and their ingenuity and their sheer talent was electrifying, just absolutely electrifying. And so I got swept up. But I have to say, and I say with pride, I never screamed. I didn't like the screaming of the girls in the audience, even though I was watching Ed Sullivan then on TV. I hadn't yet had the opportunity to go up there and see them live. But when Hard Day's Night came out later in 1964, my best girlfriend and I went down to the theater that it was shown in DC, standing in line at 6 o'clock in the morning, stayed there all day because you couldn't hear the film because all the other people, the girls especially in the movie theater, were screaming. So nobody kicked us out. We just stayed there. We brought a huge bag of candy and popcorn. And eventually, I could piece in together by multiple viewings on that day of what was being said in A Hard Day's Night. Later, when I started to read about what certain people had to say about these screaming girls, it bothered me. At the time, not so much, because I knew I wasn't one of them. But later on, thanks to feminism and just another way of looking at how popular culture can be a good mirror for what's going on, but also sort of a cartoon mirror of what's going on, I realized I didn't like how these young women were being written about. There's something very serious when you fall in love with something when you're a teenager, that you take it seriously. And if it changes your life, as it did mine, then that's a serious endeavor. That's a moment in each individual's history. So I'm all for those girls loving the Beatles. I just wish I could hear them a little bit more.
Well, we definitely talked about that in the first half of our episode, because it was on my list. It didn't make our ultimate top 5, but we talked about how that screaming fan caused the Beatles, kind of indirectly, not to want to tour, because people didn't enjoy the shows. They didn't enjoy performing them.
Right.
There was, stories that I was reading about how the stadium smelled like urine, and they would throw jelly beans at them, and it would be so loud. So there is definitely something to that fandom that definitely impacted that time, because like you said, it was everything was new.
Yeah, I mean, people had screamed more or less for Frank Sinatra, but Beatlemania was of its own. It was a frenzy, and I think you're absolutely right when you say that it was so discouraging for the Beatles. But I think what you have to add to that is they were getting discouraged because they were tired to begin with. I mean, George Harrison wanted to stop touring before 1966. He had told Brian Epstein, their manager, that he's really getting fed up with this. And he especially was worried about sort of the danger of certain fans, doing harm to the band. He refused, for instance, to go through a convertible limousine parade in Dallas when they were performing there. And he said, look, they just shot their president. We're not going to go in a convertible limousine parade in Dallas. And he hated the Jelly Babies coming at him, But I think what was happening at the same time was the kind of songs that they were writing could not at that time be adequately performed live.
That's true.
And they became artists, and they wanted to continue doing their kind of music without any constraints, and probably the difficulties of being on the road as well. Right. Well, when I saw the Beatles live on August 14th in 1965 in Ed Sullivan's studio, that was the last time the band appeared live on Ed Sullivan's show. I went to the 2:30 dress rehearsal, which was not taped, unfortunately. And it was at that time that Paul debuted Yesterday. Now, Yesterday had not been released yet in America, though it was on the British album, the Help British album that had come out a week before. So the 712 people that I think were in the Ed Sullivan audience had a real treat, because we heard the song before anybody else heard it.
Wow.
We didn't know at the time its history, but I know that he comes forward, he's got his guitar, there's a spotlight on him, and he sings Yesterday. And I don't know if people screamed while he sang. They screamed afterwards, but I don't remember a whole lot about that event, unfortunately. But I mean, that's when he sang Yesterday. And I love the fact that, well, we heard it before the country heard it. So it's a wonderful. I was one of those 7. Yes. And if anybody is listening to your podcast and was there for the 2:30 dress rehearsal, please contact me. I'd like to pick your brain. I've even thought of being hypnotized, and maybe somebody could take me back so I could remember a little bit more
unlock
about
some
that.
of those memories.
Exactly. I was there. I have the photograph,
I was going to say, that's one of the things you talk about in your book is the photograph of John Lennon from that dress rehearsal. That's the one picture that you snapped? Or the one that only came out?
No, it was the one that I snapped. I had little Kodak Instamatic cameras that you could hold in one hand and just go click, had just come out, and I had one, and you weren't supposed to take photos. And so I think that what I did was I just took the one and said, I don't want it confiscated. I just don't want it, And I don't remember. It's very mysterious. Well, I'll save that because that's what I'm going to read about, okay? About that particular photo. But it's a one-of-a-kind photo, and the memorabilia guys are after me for it. But nope. I sold my ticket stub some years back. But no, the photo stays.
That's awesome.
The history.
Let's segue into what we came here to do. Let's talk about some of the shocking facts, some of the scandalous things that the Beatles have done over the course of their careers and their lives. Now, like I mentioned before, we had 10 items. We had 5 apiece, and we whittled this down to our top 5 to take to you. So I will read them, and then after I'm done reading them, I'll have you rank them from
is that
5
how
to
it
1.
is?
And that's how it works. You're going to tell us who wins.
Yeah.
It's fun. So yeah, that's why you have all the power here, Sibbie.
I don't want that, but go ahead. I'm intrigued to find out what you.
Don't give it all to me just because feminism, Sibbie. Okay.
Okay. All right. Girl power, right? It's tangent. It's fungible. It can go. All right. I'm ready.
All right. So here are our top 5 shocking facts.
And do I know who specifically?
We will not tell you. I will tell you afterwards. Yeah, I'll tell you afterwards.
All right.
First, and this is in no particular order.
Okay.
Paul McCartney witnessed 9/11 while sitting in a plane at JFK Airport.
I did not know that. Okay.
The next fact, their dentist spiked their coffee with LSD.
Yes.
And hooked them on drugs and set everything in motion, questionably. John Lennon's dad came out of hiding to record an album to capitalize on his son's fame. George and Ringo, George was quite the ladies' man, and he had an affair with Ringo's wife, which caused a whole lot of stuff.
Okay.
And the last shocking fact, in the year 2009, an album called Everyday Chemistry was discovered in an alternate reality where the Beatles did not break up. So I want you to tell us which one is the least shocking and work your way up from 5 to 1.
Well, the least shocking, okay, this is right off the top of my head. The least shocking is the last one, Everyday Chemistry, alternate. Let's just...
Alternate realities existing is not shocking?
No, what isn't shocking is that somebody would do this. That's what's not shocking. I am surprised about this, and I will examine that. But because I know nothing about it, I got to put it last, okay?
Fine. That's fine.
All right. The most shocking. Well, I didn't know about Paul and 9/11. That is, I guess, shocking and sad.
Yes.
That he had to witness that. That's just a terrible time, in New York, a city that he loves, and obviously that John loved too. But I would put that next, even though it happened and it's sad. It's, what are you going to do? He was there, nothing he could do about it. The dentist is, it was George's dentist, and John and Cynthia and George and Patty had gone to his dentist for dinner, and they were tired. They wanted to go clubbing after dinner, and they were getting ready to go, and the dentist said, "Oh no, you haven't had your coffee yet." And so they did not know about the LSD. It was a horrible thing to do. they realized something had happened, and the dentist said, well, you can't leave now. But they were, I think, afraid what might happen if they stayed. I mean, he's a dentist, he's got tools, you know. So they all piled into George's Mini Cooper and went clubbing. But you can read George's commentary about that. I just recently read a book, the Patty Boyd's book about living with George. She details that, and Cynthia Lennon just says it was a horrible experience. So that's scandalous, but I think the scandal falls on the dentist for doing that. It's a very ugly thing to do.
Did they find a new dentist after that?
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. I don't think you want to mess with George. I think George is really one of these kind of guys that says, that's it, enough, you know. Then I would go with John's dad. He came around asking for money. He married a young woman. The young woman wrote a book about the father. John saw him a couple times because he felt bad about him, but then, you know, he said enough. Now you say the dad recorded an album. Now this I don't know. Were they sea shanty songs or what was it?
I have no idea what kind of music it was, but they said that he was a really good musician, but it didn't become a hit. John did tell his manager, please do everything you can to not make this a hit. Now I didn't see if there was anything he did to prevent it from being a hit, or if it just wasn't. You know, I think people did look down on the fact that he did that he made an album and tried to cash in on his son's fame, but they quickly forgot it. So now it's kind of just, you know, a novelty thing, and the album is worth $65 if anybody has it. So,
whoa. Well, thank you again for letting me know about this. Yeah, Alf Lennon was a character, as was Julia Lennon. So we can kind of figure that John's abilities, if you will, were inherited musically and humorless, you know, being humorous and just being kind of the character that he is. So I would put that next, and that leaves the George and Patty and Ringo and Maureen situation. And I must tell you, it's the honest truth. I can show you right here that that's on my list too.
Awesome. Well, that's why you had to rank it number one on ours then.
You know, compared to the others, yes. The reason I put it on my list was that I didn't know about this. I didn't know about this until about 3 years ago. A friend of mine just told me that she had read Patty Boyd's book, memoir about George and Eric Clapton called Wonderful Tonight. And she goes, yeah, it was a good book, but you know, George had an affair with Maureen, and you know, he'd take her to bed in the house that he shared with Patty, you know, his wife.
Oh my God! So
it was in Patty's book that I then found a fuller story about the affair with Ringo's wife. And it's not so shocking that marriages fall apart, and George and Patty's marriage didn't fall apart over this, but it certainly was a bump in the road. What I found strange, and it's sort of, I don't know, I'm not old-fashioned, but maybe I am, it's so blatant, you know, it's like hitting on somebody else's wife. I mean, the bandmate, and of course Ringo was quite upset about this, and but I guess they worked it all out, and Ringo and Maureen divorced later. I don't think it was immediate after this, and George and Patty stuck together. And then, of course, Patty fell in love with Eric Clapton, but they're all friends. George and Ringo were great friends, and George and Eric Clapton were probably best friends. So it says something, I think, about the times. I think it says something about the difficulties of being a Beatle. So it's a little microcosm, their marriages and the intertwining of these people. And by the time Yoko comes in, it really gets more complicated. But I don't think George slept with Yoko. I don't think that happened.
But I think it does show kind of a sign of the times, because these days a band like that would not get married. Those guys would not be married.
Right.
Like, I think.
Well, I'm interested now. I'm interested in that, David, because one of the things that strikes me about the Beatles is that at the heart, they are very clearly family men. And they love one another, so maybe it moves over to the wives. We would like to hear Maureen's take on it, and I've never read anything that Maureen's written, if she's ever written anything. They forgive one another too, I guess.
Yeah.
Another one now? Well, I have one about Paul, and I'm going out on a limb on this one, so I might get some, how dare you, or I might be speculating. But Paul has, and in my mind, recently, okay, by that I mean, I searched, I could find nothing back in the 60s about this. But by the time books started to come out, or he was being interviewed post-Beatles and everything, the song Blackbird, he claims, was inspired by the civil rights. Okay. Now, Blackbird was written, if we believe Paul, and I give Paul his talent, I give Paul his looks, but I want to like Paul, and I just don't. I just don't. The egoist, the vindictiveness, I suppose, the equivocations, I just don't like. And when I first heard that he claims that Blackbird is about civil rights, I didn't believe it. And I still don't believe it. And then I got thinking about it. If it's true, then he sure doesn't know much about the history of Black America. So I did, for this show, I just didn't want to come in and say, well, I just don't believe Paul McCartney, because I don't like Paul McCartney, and he just wants to draw attention to himself. There is no question that all of the Beatles loved Black people, Black music. They refused to play segregated shows. They caused all, they were outspoken about that. They remained outspoken about that. So that is not what my beef is about. My beef is that I just don't believe Paul in this. For one thing, he first talked about, and I don't have the references for this, but go with me on this, that, the song was literally that he heard a blackbird singing, and that would have been when he and the Beatles went to India and I wrote it down here, in February 1968. And Paul stayed in India with an acoustic guitar. They only had acoustic guitars because there's no, amps and stuff like that. And they wrote tons of songs, and many of those songs ended up on the White Album. Okay, Dear Prudence, for example, Blackbird is on the White Album. So Paul left India in March. Martin Luther King gets shot in April, all right? Blackbird gets recorded in June. But he talks about hearing this Blackbird in India and maybe writing the song there. Other people recall him saying that he wrote it for one of his relatives because they always liked how the Blackbird sung. So I don't really know. But something tells me that Paul believes himself that this could be about civil rights. I found out that Charles Manson thought that was one of the songs that was coded, that only Manson, was about Black liberation. And part of Manson's hysteria was that the Black Army would arm itself and, turn over white power. But Manson was insane, and we know that. But anyhow, putting that aside, let's trust Paul. Well, if he's right, look at the lyrics of the song. And that, I think, bothers me more, whether Paul got a little bit confused about when he actually wrote the song. Because what he's talking about, the chorus there is, you were only waiting for this moment to arrive, this liberating moment, this moment of the civil rights. And I mean, this is a history that waited for nobody. So I'm offended, I guess. I am offended that Paul is, and he's even talking about it now, because he and Ringo, have been outspoken about Black Lives Matter. Ringo's birthday video had a segment about that. I'm not doubting Paul's sincerity, but I just don't buy that this is a song that he intended to be about the civil rights. I just don't.
Yeah, a little too much revisionist history and a little bit of convenience and trying to maybe pat himself on the back and take credit for a little bit of a.
He's done this before. So, but I know that other people are going to just rag me about that, but there it is. So that's that. Now, back to our boy, John. In 1963, at Paul's 21st birthday, at a house in Liverpool, John got blind drunk, as everybody else did. But I guess when John Lennon gets blind drunk, that's a little bit different than other people. And at that birthday party was a Liverpool disc jockey and a Cavern Club MC named John Wooler. Now, John Wooler, all the boys knew John Wooler from their work in the Cavern Club. And at that party, Wooler basically confronted John, kind of accusing John, being in a snarky way, about the trip that John recently made with Brian Epstein to Spain. Now, everybody knew that Brian Epstein is gay. So Woolner basically sort of said, nudge, nudge, come on, tell me the truth. What did you do? You get it on with Brian? You can tell me. And John went ballistic and he beat him. He kicked him. He hit him with a stick and he put him in the hospital. And people were pulling John off and getting John out of the house. And out of the house, John falls on his knees weeping. And Cynthia writes about this in her memoir called John. And John is beside himself. Woolner's in the hospital, some broken ribs, contusions. He's in there for a while. No lasting damage, but nonetheless. John writes to him the next day, I can't tell you how sorry I am. And Brian, did some fixing. But John is on record saying to Cynthia and saying also in subsequent interviews that I will never be violent again. This is interesting. This is a question that kind of hovers around certain things. Was John Lennon homosexual or bisexual or on the down low? And around and around. Yoko says that she thinks that he, maybe longed to be gay. I don't know quite what that statement means. John says no, sometimes nothing happened, but he loved Brian. They all loved Brian. He knew that Brian loved him. He knew that. John also says, well, yeah, we had a weekend thing of it. Who knows? Do we care about that? Now, in the 60s, if this had come out, then you can imagine. It was bad enough he was married, okay, because they tried to keep that secret, at least from American fans. The English fans knew about it beforehand. But if this insinuation got any tracks back in the 60s, well, you can imagine that. That doesn't excuse John. So I'm putting that down that could be scandalous. And clearly it was a horrible moment in John's life to have beaten this man. He could have killed him. He was that drunk and that angry. He said he could have killed him, but people pulled him off. So there's that. Happy times. We may as well continue with other bad things that John have done.
Good, because Felicia and I took it easy on John in our lists.
Okay.
So,
well, all the other ones that I have here are John and Yoko and Julian, John's son, and Kyoko, Yoko's daughter, took a driving trip up to Scotland to see one of John's aunts in 1969. And stupidly, John was driving without his glasses. And they got in a bad wreck. And Yoko was hospitalized and John had stitches. The kids were okay. He did not tell Cynthia that he was going to take Julian. They had divorced by this time. He did not tell Cynthia that he was taking Julian up to Scotland. After the wreck, she was called and she picked up Julian and she was incensed. And this, of course, raises the question about John's carelessness and the fact that he was not a good father. But, you know, children change your life, no question about it, and in wonderful ways. And of course, John was not prepared to be a father to Julian. And it's very sad to read about the times that he was not a good father. We can't erase that from his history. We can't, there really isn't, we could balance it. I don't know if we can even balance it with how good he was with Sean, because that doesn't really help Julian. You know, it is what it is. It's just John was a bad father to Julian and a good father to Sean. So my final thing is more sort of cultural, really. In 1966, John had the interview for a London newspaper where he talks about that, well, we're more famous than Jesus now, all right? That famous interview with Maureen Cleave. And it didn't make any kind of stir in England. And then it gets picked up through wire services by an American magazine called Date Book in July 1966. And that's when the cultural storm began. So I'm calling this an episode of cancel culture. He got canceled. And that term didn't exist back in 1966. I can't even say it.
Cancel culture.
5 times fast, right? Yeah, that's right. And it's a real shame because there it was. The DJ said, throw out your Beatle records. This is mainly in the South. Okay, so this should be no surprise because the Bible Belt and everything like that. Bring your magazines, your albums, your posters, and we would have bonfires. And, you know, public, like Nazis burning the books, you know. Sermons, threats against John Lennon, threats against the Beatles. This was when they had a scheduled gig in Memphis. And George Harrison particularly was very nervous about this. And somebody threw a firecracker during the performance. And what is this, a gunshot? You know, no, it was just a firecracker. But imagine this, ban the Beatles, bonfires, embargoes, lots of press about this. John Bean in tears, worried that he's caused something horrible to happen. And then later, after this calms down a bit, in one of his interviews, it's a very awkward moment for him where he has to apologize and sort of say, you know, all I said was, you know, what I thought, but I'm sorry that it caused all this problem. And it was a very difficult moment for him and the rest of the bands. But I think it was indicates what's happening now with all the cancellations and everything, that you have mob energy, and it's so much easier now to do it. You don't have to physically be there, right? You can do it online. You know, I wrote an interview, a review of a Stevie Nicks book a year or so ago. And some people didn't like what I said. And then all the Stevie Nicks fans I was just getting all these emails and everything on the Washington Post website. And I was thinking, wow, they're saying these terrible things. And I called my daughter and she said wisely, calm down, Mom. It's a Friday. By Sunday, it will all be over with. And she was right. But I was wigging out because I didn't say those things. It was not my fault. They picked a, imperfect headline. I got canceled.
Well, hopefully your appearance here on List Rate Rank is not going to rile anybody up and get you canceled again.
But I've learned that to ignore it.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your list of shocking Beatles facts. To let you know, Felicia cleaned up on our points here this week. Her top 3 were the top 3 of how you place them for a total of 12 points. I got 3 points out of my 4th and 5th place.
All right.
Sibbie, your book is called My Private Lennon, Explorations from a Fan Who Never Screamed. I highly recommend it as not only a Beatles fan, but somebody who's interested in music and fandom. It has some great insights, personal insights, and firsthand accounts of history from your perspective. Can you tell us a little bit more about where to find the book and about what you have coming up?
Amazon. It's published by Mad Creek Books, which is an imprint of Ohio State University Press. So you can either go to Mad Creek Books or just go online under my name or under the title of the name. The book has, it's a collection of essays. It was chosen for OSU's series of essays, 21st century essays. So I'm in good company with that. And I'm very pleased that it got accepted, and I'm happy that it's being read.
It's a fantastic book. I found it on Amazon myself, so I would definitely recommend going out and buying it. Thank you again so much. Really appreciate you having me on as our expert for List Rate Rank.
It was so nice to meet you.
Thank you now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Please rate and subscribe to List Rate Rank on Apple, Google, Spotify, or YouTube, and find our bonus content on listraterank.com. Follow @ListRateRank on Twitter and Instagram, like List Rate Rank on Facebook, and join our Facebook group to get in on the fun. Thank you for listening to List Rate Rank.
And many more.